an establishment of the media and politicians and many others who've found that the public keep letting them down. As the late Australian philosopher Ken Minogue once said, politicians find themselves in this difficult position. We, the public, seem to think the wrong things. We express ourselves the wrong way. We hold many of the wrong views. And it's amazing that they keep putting up with us. And we, the public, have discovered that we've become a disappointment to our politicians. It's an awful position to find ourselves in. Well, this keeps happening. This keeps happening, that the public keep coming back with the wrong answer. So now you have a set of explanations for this. The public are, for instance, misled by fake news. There is fake news around. When has there not been? I think that fake news was invented 2 years ago. Never read the New York Times if you thought that. That we were misled. Take what happened a few days ago in Germany. This stabbing of a German man seems to have got into a fight with a young Iraqi and a young Syrian man in Chemnitz, and then there have been these terrible disturbances and all sorts of... a set of politicians blamed the fake news. They said there were people saying that the man who was killed had stepped in to stop a woman from being hurt. And this is fake news. And these people are all being whipped up by fake news. Don't you see? It's all fake news. The German guy is still dead. And that's the key bit to focus on there. That's the bit you shouldn't be glossing over so fast. But no, that's the thing. It's the public are misled. And then we have the thing which we've had from Brexit in the UK, from many other things, which is that we get misled very easily, that we're kind of simpletons in the general public, and there's so much we just keep getting wrong. These are very, very dangerous things for a political class anywhere to do. To basically say, I'm not going to listen to the public. I'm going to try to defeat the public. And I say on the migration issue, something which I want to leave you with, which is that I say that in the case of Europe, we're basically in the situation that a lifeboat is in. We think of ourselves as this, certainly from Norway, this is easier to think of than, say, in southern Italy. We basically think of ourselves as this continent that can just keep taking people in, and that we're a sort of huge liner. And I say that actually we're something more like a lifeboat ourselves. And we need to work out how many people we can bring in, how many people we can actually save from the undoubtedly terrible waters all around us, what our limits might be, and where we might sadly have to say no. Now, the thing about this is that lifeboats, as you know, have a thing on the side usually that say this boat cannot take more than 75 people, for instance. Now, we don't have anything like that. There is no sign on the side of Europe that says maximum occupancy, 400 million or whatever. We don't have that, and we're never going to have it. There is only one thing we have, which is that the people in the boat, if they think that it's getting very dangerous, have the right to say to the captain, stop bringing people on board. That's the one safety valve we have. And if the captain says, I'm not listening to you because you must be racist, then we're in real trouble. And the publics keep on blowing whistles, saying not we hate the world, not keep everyone out, nothing like it. All the polls show that the European publics are very tolerant about actual asylum seekers, for instance. All the polls show that. So we resent this attempt to make us all into bigots if we happen to not think the, as it's clear, fading narrative that's been going on for generations. But every time the public tries to say, we're getting worried down here, they're told, shut up. And this seems to me to be an incredibly dangerous development. I'll finish on this thought, but we have to think, among other questions in these regards, about things like the following. Who is Europe for? can Europe be the home of anyone in the world who walks in and calls it home? Now, my suggestion would be that the answer to that question is no. It cannot be, sadly, regrettably, but it cannot be. The welfare state will not put up with it. Societally, it will not put up with it. Culturally, it will not put up with it. Fine. In which case, you have to have an entirely different conversation than the one we've been having. You have to have a serious conversation about what your limits are, where those limits end, and how you can behave decently along the way with that in mind. And we, I think, in different countries are having some of that conversation. Some countries are going to run way ahead of that and have an indecent conversation. I've no doubt about that. But the surest way to have the indecent conversation is not to have the sane and sensible conversation now. So I suppose I just finished with this, and this one thought. I started off with that head of Hermes in your National Gallery, which is to be careful with this. If there's one thing I've learned from traveling around the world, it's that what you have here and what we have in my country and what we have generally in Europe is very unusual. It's very unusual. It is not the natural default state of humankind. It isn't the case that if you throw everybody into a cauldron anywhere in the world, it always comes out looking like Oslo. Sadly. But that's the case. So in that case, be careful with it. And sometimes people say to me, because we have now the resurgent questions about nationhood, and nationalism, and patriotism indeed. And many people don't like these conversations, and I don't like a lot of the conversation. But some years ago, I clarified this to myself when somebody said to me, do you feel patriotic? And I said, that's a very difficult question to answer, because I'm not entirely sure. I said, well, patriotism suggests something that you yourself maybe have contributed to, and something you yourself have fought for, and something more. And I'm just very lucky to have inherited this. So here's my response to that question, which I leave you with before handing over to you for Q&A on, by the way, whatever you want. I'm very happy to roam as widely as you fancy. No question too low. I'd leave you with this thought that my answer to this question is that you don't have to be some kind of tub-thumping nationalist. You don't have to be right-wing. You don't have to be left-wing. You don't have to be anything else. All that I would suggest to people as one of the ways through this is to recognize that we should approach ourselves and what we have with a sense of gratitude. To sense the gratitude for the unbelievable good fortune that we have. We can wish that the rest of the world had that good fortune as well. But then the great question for us is, how do we enjoy that good fortune without making sure that the next generation has something that's less fortunate? And I think that that's eminently possible, but it starts with a conversation, and it's a conversation I think we're way overdue to have. With that, I hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Very specific one, and then we'll hear from you there. Yeah.
Yeah, hello. I have a twofold question. One is about identity. I think, I'm from Germany, and coming to an abroad country, I learned a lot about my own identity. If you have nothing to compare your own identity with, how do you really know your own identity? And I want to make a second point. In Germany, over 800,000 refugees came. We didn't know who those people are. People welcomed them. People really, really engaged into the community, helped, and they still do. There's a small minority which is really loud and is complaining about them, but there's a huge majority which really helps and engages with those refugees to integrate them. So what do you think about that when you talk about those huge flows of immigrants into England, because I can't see them?
Don't put the microphone back yet just yet. I want to ask you a question. Of those million refugees that Germany very famously welcomed, if, heaven forbid, but if one of them even was later involved in an act of terrorism, I know, I just want to, because we had the case, obviously that has happened, but I'm just interested in because of what Douglas said about the case of somebody, Salman Abedi, who was granted asylum in this country and then went on to kill. Does that change your view of the million who have been welcomed?
I don't think so, because also hundreds of thousands of Turks came 50 years ago, and nothing really much happened. So if there's it's one person out of 1 million.
Okay. Let's hear.
First of all, it's not the case that it's been fine with Turkish migration since the Gastarbeiter period. Merkel herself said in 2010 that it had been a disaster. Then 5 years later, she made the disaster far bigger. But in 2008, Erdogan went to Germany and spoke to tens of thousands of Turks in Europe from the Netherlands, Belgium, and Germany, and said at a massive public rally, "Do not integrate, but get involved in politics because we need you." I'm sorry, this is subversion. This is outright subversion of European democracies. So yes, we had a problem. And as for as it were, would it matter if 1 in 1 million became a suicide bomber? Again, it's a cost-benefit analysis, isn't it? As long as you're not the one standing outside the wine bar in Ansbach when the suicide bomber goes off, it might be okay for you. It might be okay, and it seems to be for most people in our political parties in Britain, it might be okay for you to not worry about this identity question, not worry about the numbers, but you've just got to hope your kids don't like Ariana Grande and go on the wrong night. But I think the cost-benefit analysis of this has to be weighed up, and if you do think that, then say it.
Okay.
Say, we'll take a suicide bombing every now and then, we'll take the stabbings every now and then. Sure.
Christine wants